when we talk with people in the engineering side of the house, they often say, well, this has nothing to do with us, everything to do with you. And we'll talk a little bit about how that works. But it also deals with the kind of the core issues and concepts that ISOC was created, which is to create the internet society, a society that's open and available to everyone. So we're going to talk a little bit about the legal and policy activities that are happening in the North America sector and globally. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the current and emerging technology challenges that have happened, how you can work with us in a chapter to try and act globally or act locally, depending on what your projects are, to help inject the needs of persons with disabilities and special needs into your activities and your projects. And finally, what you and your chapters can do, even without talking to us, that will improve the engagement of persons with disabilities within your regions and locations. So, hope this is making sense.
That sounds like a great agenda. That sounds perfect, Mark.
Okay, good. Let's talk a little bit about the digital divide. This term has been thrown around for years. When we talk about the digital divide for persons with disabilities, we're dealing with about 1 billion people worldwide. That's a lot of people. That's, you know, and it can be a number of different impairments. It can be any kinds of different things, everything from aging issues to accidents, to mind victims, to mental health issues, to the kind of classic disabilities of persons with mobility or visual or hearing impairments. All of that, all those impairments create challenges not just in doing daily activities, but oftentimes in doing internet activities as well. However, the internet's a great equalizer. We all know that already. We're sitting here talking in diverse areas from across the world, trying to collaborate and identify opportunities for each other. The internet is often the only way for persons with disabilities and special needs to interface with the community as an equal. Persons with disabilities and special needs, and especially in certain cultures, are very stigmatized. They oftentimes are socially isolated because of their physical isolation. The internet provides an opportunity to address that physical and social isolation and allow them to engage the community, either whether it's engaging for governmental services that can help them live more independence, or whether it's actually to do economic activities. I mean, the fact is a person with a disability using a computer and having supportive technologies that support persons with disabilities can do jobs that almost any of us can do. And so we really get into situations where it's a great equalizer and it's a great opportunity. And when we create barriers for persons with disabilities and special needs within the internet, we create situations where those economic opportunities lock out of for those people, because they can't often do manual labor. They often don't have other opportunities that they can plug into to move that forward. So, currently, let's take a look at the big picture first. Globally, the Internet Governance Forum has noted the need for persons with disabilities and special needs as stakeholders in the day-to-day activities of the governance forum. There have been governance activities going on, and that's created opportunities for us to start injecting those discussions. But we haven't had the level of engagement with IGF that we think that needs to happen. A lot of times there's kind of the generic statement of, gee, everything has to be accessible, without actually getting into the details of what that looks like. Excuse me, I have to perform a catectomy. Article 9 of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities includes barriers for information communication technologies be removed as part of governmental activities in support of the convention. Now, Canada and the U.S. are signatories for it. The U.S. has not ratified its signature for that now, but the U.S. has its own governmental laws about persons with disabilities, so that's not really relevant for this discussion. Mexico has actually signed both the convention and the law, which mandates W3C conformance with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So now that said, when you look at enforcement, Mexico's enforcement's not really as oriented and plugged in at this point. So what's happening at the country level? Well, in Canada, you've got very strong governmental requirements for accessibility. The common look and feel, I think it's now at 3.0, mandates the guideline 2.0 engagement, and it the provincial governments to provide accessible information. There are accessible information resources within every single provincial government in Canada. So there's very strong elements. There's a fairly thriving accessibility community within the provincial governments as well. And then in Ontario and Quebec, you have specific business accessibility requirements as well. So your not just your governmental requirements, but also storefronts, electronic storefronts, and electronic services have to meet accessibility requirements as well within those provinces. So you've got a number of activities going on. So in Mexico, government and a UN Convention for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The challenge we have in Mexico has been enforcement. There really hasn't been a consistent enforcement. There hasn't been kind of the collaborative infrastructure that there has been both in Canada and the U.S. for providing technical support to the kind of provincial and local governments to provide accessibility. There's also not any mandates for industrial accessibility, so commercial activities don't necessarily have a mandate to ensure accessibility over and above just the governmental activities. Now, in the U.S., I know I see we've got a lot of U.S. people here. Most of you are familiar with Section 508, which is the governmental requirement that says the federal government's activities have to be accessible to persons with disabilities, the technologies they use, and the technologies they provide. There's also strong requirements for state and commercial accessibility. We've had numerous legal activities that have required brick and mortar stores that have web options to make those web options accessible. Also had completely web-oriented storefronts such as Amazon, where originally the discussion about it, they've been pretty much mandated that they have to make their infrastructures accessible as well. Now, this is kind of stretching some of the legal areas of the Americans with Disabilities Act, but there's been very little pushback, and most of the time the pushback has quieted down pretty quick. We've had very strong positive activities in the U.S. about accessibility. Let's talk about some of the challenges that are emerging right now, and this leads into the discussion that you were talking about, Ted and Paul, about how we might be able to work together and collaborate to address some issues. One of the big issues that's coming right now is cloud-based software. We're not as a lot of the cloud-based software is not standardized and doesn't follow the technical standards. Either for accessibility or for anything else. Basically, it's hobbled together to be as efficient as possible and to give a very nice look and feel. However, there's not a lot of coding behind it that ensures accessibility. Cloud-based software is clearly the direction that a number of organizations are going. We're starting to see that's a great opportunity for people, actually in emerging markets, to be able to get access to world-class technology tools at costs that they can afford. However, they're now entering the marketplace as tools that persons with disabilities are having challenges dealing with. Mobile and tablet devices, there's a broad range of accessibility issues with mobile and devices in general. We're also finding that some of the standards for wireless technologies provide for the kind of high-speed connections and the capabilities that are necessary to ensure that persons with disabilities can do things, video relay chat over old devices. The old TTY has gone by the wayside. SMS and video chatting are becoming the standards for interaction between persons with disabilities. Collaboration technologies like this one, they work great when they work, but they're not always, where are we here? There's certainly standards compliance is one of the big issues we're having, and we're having that issue across a number of different environments. Like I said, wireless, you'd be surprised, but wireless standards are a big deal for us because of the fact that we have a lot of people with disabilities using specialized devices. They have specialized phones or specialized internet devices, and when we have issues with standards compliance, it creates a huge factor for them because they literally live their lives through that interface. Those are all issues that are coming up. So now, where do we come in and how can we help you? Well, one of the advantages that the Disabilities and Special Needs chapter has, of course, is that we're a global chapter. We've seen a lot of these issues before, and we can actually bring to bear a number of resources that have already been developed in different areas of the globe. If you want some information about how to develop, municipality accessibility plans, well, we have some great resources from Australia about how to do municipal accessibility plans. Let's say you need you need technical standards on the engineering of software. Well, we've got some great stuff from the EU on software engineering standards for accessibility. Of course, we've got good interlinks with the W3C, and we sit on the W3C's Education Outreach Committee, and we have all kinds of resources for internet and web accessibility technology information. Most of our people are accessibility leaders across the globe, so we can provide technical assistance in just about any language you want, and a few that I couldn't even name. Which has helped us in a number of ways. I don't think we have as much of an issue with that with the North American chapter, but we certainly do when we get into the Asian chapters as well. We're certainly willing and interested in collaborating on projects that include persons with special needs, and that means whether it means community organizations. I know we've been talking with Glenn about some vet accessibility options and employment options for persons with disabilities. We think that the internet is an exceptional leveraging point for that sort of thing. But we're also looking for everything from providing community supports to engaging persons with disabilities in roles as testers and as as technical experts to provide specific information. And sometimes you'd be surprised how we had a request from Avaya about 6 months ago, just for some people who'd be willing to look at their IP phones, and we managed to get voice over IP phones to people globally just by literally plugging them into Avaya's need for testers for people with disabilities. We got some high quality voice over IP phones available to people who didn't even have telephone service before. So we're trying to leverage these projects. The North American goals for us are more around some of the larger policy activities happening. The DC, especially chapter, tends to be oriented around the big policy issues. We want to be engaged with that, and we want to be able to provide some supports for that. We have a question here from Thomas. Do you have anything about how a city might be fashioned to address the needs of those with special needs? Domain names that might need to be set aside? Yeah, we actually have a special needs issues that came up around multilingual domain names, but we also have created some thoughts about how to create domain structures that would be specifically supportive of persons with disabilities. We don't have an engagement yet with ICANN that's formal, but we're working on that because I think that's a really good thought about how we might be able to create some kind of common spaces for persons with disabilities, and I'd like to look into that. That sounds like an excellent opportunity. And finally, we can provide policy briefs. We can give you research. Most of us are accessibility nerds. We eat, live, and breathe this stuff. For those of you who don't know what I do for a full-time job, I'm the Section 508 coordinator for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. So I work globally in e-health and the accessibility of e-health as part of my full-time job. So we do a lot of e-health work just because it happens to be in my bailiwick. But we also have the ability to extract lots of publicly available data from WHO on persons with disabilities and some of the needs that they've identified. Okay, so my last slide before questions and discussion is what you all can do without having to engage us at all, things that you don't have to do. One is be accessible. Hold your meetings in consideration for persons with disabilities. That means providing resources ahead of time, utilizing text-based chat when it's appropriate, like you're doing right here. Ensure that when you announce that that you're having a meeting or a chapter meeting, ask if anyone there's going to be any persons with disabilities. Engage with ISOC if you need support in terms of creating a captioning environment or something that can be webcast out so that you can have those captioning resources available to you and make sure that people with disabilities can see that. If you're putting out a video or training materials, get them captioned. Make sure that when you produce those videos that you describe as part of the video production, you describe what's happening on the screen. So if you're showing somebody, for example, how to set up a voice over IP phone, just as an example, or how to write an engagement, explain what's happening on the screen so that you can say, hey, this is what's happening. A person who might not have great vision or who may have a visual impairment doesn't have to try and guess what's happening. Don't ever, if you're showing a chart, don't ever just say, as you can see by this chart, you can see we have a problem. You say, as you can see by this chart, persons with disabilities are being excluded from a number of different internet technologies, especially this technology, and this technology. Those are the kinds of things you can do that don't require any huge amounts of effort, but will improve the opportunity for persons with disabilities to engage in your chapters. Advocate locally, nationally, globally for standards adoptions and best practices. Don't accept when your industry partners or when you're working alongside somebody and they say, hey, let's just slap it together on this, and you look at it and it's clearly not developed well, or it doesn't provide support for people with disabilities. Say, we got to kind of eat our own. We have to take our own medicine first. And if we're gonna be in the situation of trying to support persons with disabilities and truly be advocates, then we do have to recognize the fact that there are times we're going to have to inconvenience ourselves if we're asking other people to be inconvenienced as well. You want to ensure persons with disabilities are part of the discussion regarding new and emerging technologies when you're deciding on new technologies within your chapter, or if you're looking to promote new technologies as a part of a project. Talk with some persons with disabilities, and if you don't think you have any persons with disabilities in your chapter or area, reach out to us and we will be glad to see if there are people in your area who want to engage with you. So don't hesitate to do that reach out. But even within your organizations, we'd love to make sure that your members with disabilities feel that they're part of the community and not just getting an email occasionally about things. If you're writing project plans, please think about including persons with disabilities and identifying for us any opportunities that the Disabilities and Special Needs chapter might be able to collaborate on your project and provide some value in that area as well. Judith asked a great question. Any word on getting Google Docs to be more accessible? Well, Vint and I had a discussion about this 8 months ago, and they are working on it. There are a number. The challenge actually has been Google Hangouts. Google Docs is becoming more and more accessible each iteration. So several of the developments that they've had have been driven by the fact that the U.S. federal government has started using Google Docs in some of its agencies, and they've pushed back and said, if you don't make it accessible, we're going to have to go over and buy ourselves some Microsoft 365 licenses, and that's gotten their attention far more than just jumping up and down about it. Money always works, but there is a whole list served just dedicated to Google accessibility, and I can provide you guys links to. Jolie put up something about that. There's a whole discussion about Google accessibility and how to improve Google Doc accessibility. I'll be honest with you, they've come a long way. And they have been working with us, and we have a number of our staff or our chapter members that are testers. In order to really make it work, you have to be using Chrome. You have to be using some of the Google technologies that plug into it. But there's also been a lot of work done for Android accessibility, which as a platform started out in a pretty bad place and now has quickly caught up. Especially in the areas of persons with mobility impairments, to some of the Apple environments. A lot of people had once upon a time thought that the iPad environment was the number one, and it still is, certainly for persons who have severe visual impairments. But we've seen a lot of progress in the Android market as well. And obviously, Vint is very motivated to get those things moved. So he has a conversation with us about it twice a year, just kind of a touch base about Google technologies. And so if you all see something that really needs work besides Hangouts, which we've had, knockdown, drag-out fights with them about, let us know, and we'll certainly do it. Judith said that there's many people use spreadsheets, and the spreadsheets are not accessible. They actually are getting better. You can at least navigate through them now, and the voiceover will read them. Which once upon a time they were just pictures of spreadsheets. It was much worse. So there is progress there. It's still a challenge. Collaboration technologies in general are a challenge. I want to be very clear. We get into some significant challenges with collaboration technologies, and none of them are great. Some of them are horrible, but none of them are great. Okay, so question about accessibility, about the chapter. We've got about 200, and I guess I can tell you a little more about the chapter. We've got about 260 members globally. It's about a third U.S. and then the rest are scattered around, mostly in Western countries, although we have a strong presence in China, and we have a number of people in the Afghanistan-Pakistan region who have become members. So we're kind of excited about that engagement as well. Our Hong Kong, we've got several people in Hong Kong. We've got a new group that's forming. That's oh dear, I can't remember the term for them, but the group up in Estonia and Lithuania. And Latvia. I can't remember the name. I keep wanting to say they're the Baltic area, but they're there's a whole group there that have suddenly just joined up. And we've always had a strong Serbian and Romanian contingent. So Eastern Europe has always been well represented within our group. So I guess I'll answer Judith's question. Are they a challenge because they're not standards based? Yes, they are a challenge because they're not standards based. Although they've been moving towards HTML5, and as they've been moving that way, they've been getting better. The challenge, of course, that we've been having with standards, and this is something that our discussed with W3C, is that HTML5 has its own challenges in and of itself. HTML5, although it's wonderful, it doesn't always provide all of the functionality and capability that people want, and so you get into this kind of catch-22 of, if you make it HTML5, it works on every platform and it scales nicely and it degrades nicely and it's fully accessible, but it doesn't do all the things that people want, so people don't want to use it. And there's no right answer to that. We're working on that. We're even having the same challenges at CDC, getting that balance between accessible environments and standards, and on our requirements for functionality and usability.
And Ted, did you want to add anything else before we go? I'm sure glad to have you here.
No, it's good to be here. I'm glad I was here. I'm glad I was able to make the time. No, I mean, I love listening to Mark talk about some of these things. I try to talk to our vendors about accessibility, and there are some additional things that we're looking for to sensitize people. And the more tools that we have to do that, and the more that we can continue to raise consciousness internally, we can do that job externally as well. And one other thing, that I'm working with a group of people in northern Florida who look like they're interested in forming a child cybersecurity chapter. Now, I'm not sure it's actually going to go that direction, but there are apparently a number of people that they're connected to across the U.S. right now, and they're trying to get connected also to some of our other chapters who are doing work in that area. So stay tuned to this space to see what more that our communities are doing in child cybersecurity.
Very cool. Good stuff.